Good afternoon. I am Dr. Tolima Yogi Sinha Roy from the Department of Economics. I am an associate professor, and today I have decided to speak on the fundamentals of utility theory. The reason I chose this topic was I thought that it might immensely benefit students who study utility in their undergraduate syllabus. It is a part of introduction in microeconomics. So that is the reason I focused on this particular area. In economics, we actually divide the people into two groups. One is the consumers and the other group is the producers. The consumers are actually the people who buy various goods and commodities, they consume them, and they get a certain level of satisfaction from them. Producers, on the other hand, produce the goods, they sell them, and they want to derive profits. So basically, the motives of the consumers and the producers are sort of conflicting and different. The consumers, they want to maximize their utility, paying the lowest amount of money, and the producers, they want to maximize their profit with minimizing of cost. So it is very important to understand what utility is all about, because it is through this conflicting objectives of producers and the consumers that equilibrium price is determined. So we need to focus on two very important things, utility and profits. Today my area would be entirely on utility. Now what is utility? Utility is actually the different levels of satisfaction which a consumer derives by consuming different goods and services. The behavior of a consumer can be very well understood if we know the utility theory. Now, there are basically two types of utility theories that have been developed. One is the cardinal utility theory, which was mainly developed by Marshall, and the other is the ordinal utility theory that was developed by Edgeworth, Pareto, Gibbons, and others. The two types of utilities are actually different. And the cardinal utility theory measures utility numerically. We can assign numbers to the utility levels we attain. But the ordinal utility theory does not measure utility numerically. All it does is rank the different commodity bundles that are consumed. So basically the approaches are different, but both the utility theories are trying to relate to the same thing that we shall understand by the end of this presentation. Marshall's utility theory is also known as cardinal utility theory, and Marshall based his theory on certain assumptions. His first assumption was that all consumers are rational. This means that consumers are logical people. They take their decisions knowing their limitations, how much income they have, what type of goods they would like to consume, what gives them more satisfaction, and all these things are known by them. Next is, utility is measurable numerically in units called utils. Supposing I consume a glass of water, and I have to, according to cardinal utility theory, assign a number to it. Say it is 5 utils. Okay? I consume another glass of water, and again I assign a number to it. So for each good that I consume, I have to assign certain numbers. This theory also tells us that it is human nature that as we go on consuming more and more goods or more and more unit of a particular good, our level of satisfaction gradually declines. So the marginal utility, which is the additional utility derived due to the additional unit of a consumption is actually falling as we consecutively go on increasing our consumption. Another assumption is that the marginal utility of money is constant. It is measured by lambda according to this theory. Now, what is the marginal utility of money? It is the additional utility that is derived by spending, say, an additional rupee or a dollar. And this is assumed to be constant in Marshall's theory. Marshall also said that all the utilities can be added up. For example, if I consume different amounts of goods, say x1, x2 and so on, then my aggregate utility from all these goods, that is utility function of x1, up to the nth commodity, that is xn, will be equal to utility of x1 plus utility of x2 plus plus utility of xn. So what it is to say is that we can add up all the utilities. Now, in the diminishing marginal utility, as I already mentioned, as the consumer consumes more and more units of a commodity, the successive marginal utilities gradually diminish. This is related to total utility. When total utility may be rising but at a decreasing rate, marginal utility starts falling. When total utility is maximum, marginal utility is zero. When total utility starts falling, marginal utility becomes negative. So, when total utility is max, that indicates that the consumer has attained the maximum level of satisfaction. And beyond that, if he still goes on increasing his consumption, then the the marginal utilities will become negative. So, it is not only that marginal utility can decrease, they can also become negative after the saturation levels are reached. Now, here what we have done is we have used a utility function. Utility is a function of commodity Q, that is Q is the amount of consumption the consumer rates. Lambda is the marginal utility of money, P is the price of the commodity, and Q is the quantity that he consumes. So utility as a function of quantity is the utility gained, and lambda, as I said, is the marginal utility of money. So if I buy Q units, that means I spend PQ. So for PQ, the total utility that is sacrificed is lambda PQ. Now the objective of the consumer would be to max his net utility. So what is net utility? Net utility is total utility gained minus the utility that is sacrificed. So that is UQ minus lambda PQ. Now, like any maximization minimization problem, the first order condition is that the slope of the net utility function should be equal to 0. So here del UQ by del Q minus lambda P, del Q cancels out, is equal to 0. So what we are deriving is that del UQ by del Q is equal to lambda P. Now del UQ by del Q is nothing but the marginal utility. That is the additional utility derived by consuming an additional unit of a commodity. Now marginal utility is equal to lambda P, or we can rearrange and write that the ratio of marginal utility and price is equal to lambda, which is equal to the marginal utility of money. So this is the equilibrium condition in case of a consumer who is consuming only one commodity, and his condition, the condition of his equilibrium is ratio of marginal utility and price, which is equal to the marginal utility of money. Now if I try to demonstrate this on a diagram, it would be like this. On the x-axis we are choosing the commodity that is being consumed. Y-axis measures the marginal utility and lambda P. curve, lambda p is constant because it has no relation to the quantity consumed, so it is parallel to the quantity axis. Let us first focus on QA. At QA, the corresponding marginal utility is QAA, or you can say AQA. And the lambda p, that is the utility sacrificed, is QAC. So since here the utility gained is greater than utility sacrificed, it would be logical for the consumer to increase his consumption beyond QA. Let us consider another point to the right of the equilibrium level, say QB. Let this point be QB. At QB, we notice just the reverse. At QB, marginal utility is less. It is QBD, and the lambda b is QB up to D. So it is QBD. So here, the utility sacrifice is again greater than utility gain. So in such a case, it would be logical for the consumer to decrease his consumption. It is only at the level of QE where NU and lambda p are same. That means the marginal utility gain is equal to lambda p. So utility gain and utility sacrifice are same, corresponding to the level QE. So this is the equilibrium position of the consumer. In case he deviates from QE to the left or the right, he will again return back here. So this is not only an equilibrium, it is also a stable equilibrium. Now what we have done, we have used the basic deduction of this theory to derive one of the most important theorems in economics, that is the law of demand. See, the price lines are different, lambda p1, lambda p2, lambda p3, and we have our NU curve. The intersection point between lambda p1 and NU is at A. Similarly, we have points B and C. We have different equilibrium quantities Q1, Q2 and Q3 corresponding to the different prices. Now, if we use the upper panel and draw perpendicular lines from the equilibrium quantities to the lower panel, we see we get again the quantities as Q1, Q2, Q3, and we know that Q1 corresponds to price P1, so we put that P1, P2 and P3 on the y-axis. And here we observe that we get three points, D, E and F. When we join these 3 points, D, E and F, what we are getting is the demand curve. So the demand curve, as we can see, is a downward sloping curve. It indicates that because as we see here, your P1 is the greatest price, followed by P2 and then P3. On the other hand, Q1 is the least quantity, and it is less than Q2, and Q2 is again less than Q3. So when the price is highest at P1, the quantity consumed by the consumer is least at Q1. When the price falls, the consumer buys more quantity. When the price falls further to P3, the consumer buys more quantity Q3. So as the price falls, the quantity consumed by the consumer is increasing. This means that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity. So marginal utility theory has helped in the derivation of the fundamental law of demand and also the demand curve. So what is the law of demand? The two things that marginal utility theory has helped us to derive is the law of demand and the demand curve. The law of demand states that ceteris paribus, that means all other things remaining constant, say the income of the consumer, the prices of other goods, complements, substitutes, all these things states that preferences remaining constant. As the price of the commodity falls, the quantity consumed by him is increasing. This means that the law of demand is again portrayed in the demand curve. The demand curve is just a graphical representation of the law of demand. It tells us that the demand curve is downward sloping, which means there is an inverse relationship between the price of the commodity and the quantity consumed. So these are the two basic important theories has helped us in deriving. So that is why this theory is so very important. In the previous slide, we actually derived the equilibrium of the consumer for a one commodity in case he consumes a single commodity. Let us now extend this condition to several commodities. Supposing there are n commodities, okay, 1, 2, n minus 1 and then n commodity. So each of these commodities, they have their respective prices P1, P2, Pn. Their respective marginal utilities mu1, mu2, mun. Now the equilibrium condition for all these n commodities will be mu1 by P1 is equal to mu2 by P2 is equal to mun by Pn. The whole thing is equal to lambda. Now lambda is the marginal utility of money, and this equation is known as it represents the law of equimarginal utility. Now, in order to understand this equation, let us focus on any two commodities. Say commodity 1 and commodity 2. Supposing there is an inequality between them. So mu1 by P1 is not equal to mu2 by P2. If mu1 by P1 is greater than mu2 by P2, what does it signify? It signifies for every 1 rupee spent on commodity 1, the additional utility that we get, okay, is greater than the same thing for commodity 2. Okay? That means for every $1 spent on commodity 2, the marginal utility is less than for every $1 spent in commodity 1. So in such a case, it would be wise for the consumer to increase his consumption of commodity 1 and decrease his consumption of commodity 2. Now as he does this by the virtue of the law of diminishing marginal utility, his mu will decrease and mu1 will decrease and mu2 will increase. Similarly, if mu1 by P1 is less than mu2 by P2, then just the reverse will happen. He will purchase more of mu2 and consume more of the commodity 2, and he will decrease his purchase of commodity 1. Again, in this process, the marginal utility of commodity 1 will increase and the marginal utility of commodity 2 will decline. So a state will arrive when mu1 by P1 will be equal to mu2 by P2. This whole thing is happening due to the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now, therefore, we extend this two commodity case for all the commodities and we get the law of equimarginal utility. So, in a two commodity case, to simplify, mu1 by P1 is equal to mu2 by P2 is equal to lambda. Now, there are several limitations of this theory. First of all, this theory is based on various quality assumptions. The most important shortcoming of this theory is that it assumes that consumers can actually measure the utility that they derive. Now, this is not logical, because supposing I have a glass of lemonade and I say that I derive 5 utils from it. Why not 7? Why not 9? Why not 3? Why not 2? I mean, how do I do that? So that is very difficult, to assign numbers to what utility I am deriving. So that is a basic fallacy of this theory. Another shortcoming is that it assumes that the law of diminishing marginal utility is universal. Now this is again not true, because the law of diminishing marginal utility only applies to people who are not addicted to any commodity. If a person is addicted to, say, smoking or say alcohol or drugs, in their case the marginal utility will never decline. It will go on increasing. So this means that this theory is not applicable in their case, so they should be left out of this theory. Another fallacy of this theory is that it assumes that the marginal utility of money is constant, which means that it is same for all income groups. A rich person, a poor person, all value one rupee as the same way, but that cannot be true. To a constant across income groups. And the final fallacy of this theory is that it adds all the utilities. Supposing I am preparing tea. So in tea, I need water, I need tea leaves, I can put milk, sugar and all these things. So my utility of tea would be equal to then utility of sugar plus utility of water plus utility of tea leaves plus utility of milk and so on. And this again is not logical. So these criticisms can be made of this theory, but why do we study this theory? Why does this theory still feature in all undergraduate syllabus? It is because it has derived the law of demand. The fundamental law of economics, that is the law of demand and the demand curve, that is why this theory needs to be studied. So next we move on to the ordinal utility theory. In ordinal utility theory, this basic shortcoming of marginal utility theory no longer exists. Why? Because here utility no longer is measured in newtons. Utility is actually ranked. They have given the concept of commodity bundles. A commodity bundle is a collection of commodities. Supposing I have a commodity bundle A and B, and supposing there are two commodities that I consume, X and Y. So in the first bundle, I have X1 amount of commodity X and Y1 amount of commodity Y, and in another bundle B, I have X2 of commodity X and Y2 of commodity Y. Obviously, X1 and X2 are not equal. Similarly, Y1 and Y2 are not equal. So this means that the two commodity bundles are entirely different. Now, if they are equal, supposing if X1 equal to X2 or Y1 equals to Y2, then I can say that the bundles are same. A is indifferent to D. It can also happen that X1 is more than X2, but again Y2 is more than Y1. In that case also it would be a case of A and B can be indifferent commodity. A and B can be indifferent commodity bundles. But if X1 is greater than X2, okay, and Y1 is equal to Y2, then commodity A will be preferred to B, A, B, B. Similarly, if X1 equal to X2 and Y1 greater than Y2, again commodity A will be preferred to B. So you see, we can rank all our commodity bundles. Either the bundles will be indifferent to each other or one will be preferred to another. Okay? And this ranking can extend to any number of commodity bundles. Now there are certain actions on which the indifference curve theory is based. First is the axiom of completeness. In this axiom, it states that there is not a single commodity bundle that will be left unranked. Whatever commodity bundles we have in the commodity space, each one will be ranked. Okay? The next one is axiom of transitivity. Supposing there are three bundles, A, B and C. If A is preferred to B and B is preferred to C, then by transitivity, A will be preferred to C. Okay? Next, if A is indifferent to B and B is indifferent to C, then again by transitivity, A will be preferred to C. Next is the assumption of selection. Here, the action says that the consumer will always choose the most preferred bundle. Okay? He will not choose a bundle which has less of any particular commodity than another bundle. He will always choose the bundle which gives him the maximum satisfaction, and therefore he will choose always the most preferred bundle. The action of continuity of preferences says that the consumer will not exhibit different types of preferences with respect to the commodity bundles. If he is choosing A over B, he will always choose A over B. If he is choosing B over C, he will choose B over C. And finally, the axiom of dominance, which is also known as the axiom of non-satiation or axiom of monotonicity. Here also, commodity will choose the commodity bundles with more of at least one commodity than other commodity bundles. So these are the basic 5 assumptions or axioms on the basis of which the indifference curve theory is developed. Now, situation. Now, in regarding to commodity bundles, how can I be indifferent to the different commodity bundles? Let us see this in these two pictures, and let me demonstrate that. First of all, you see that in the first picture, there is a commodity bundle 1, and we have divided the entire picture into 4 quadrants. On the upper half, there is a northwest quadrant and northeast quadrant, and on the lower half, there is a southwest quadrant and there is a southeast quadrant. Please note that in the southwest quadrant, all the bundles are inferior to 1. Why? Inferior to commodity bundle 1. Now my question is, why is this so? This is because compared to why any bundle in the southwest zone has less of at least 1 commodity than 1. Similarly, in the northeast zone or northeast quadrant, every commodity bundle has more of at least 1 commodity than commodity 1. So the southwest quadrant is inferior to 1 and the northeast quadrant is superior to 1. Now let us go to the northwest zone and the southwest zone. In the northwest zone, you see, it may happen that compared to commodity Y, one of the commodities, commodity bundle Y, one of the commodities, say U, may have more of one commodity than Y and less of the other commodity than Y. Okay? Same thing can happen with V. So this means in the northwest zone there is a commodity bundle which can be indifferent to Y. Similarly, in the southeast quadrant there would be another commodity bundle which can be indifferent to Y. Now, if we move to the second part of the picture, we will see that supposing our reference bundle is X. Now, compare Y to X. You see, commodity Y has more of small y, that small y commodity. That means this capital Y is preferred to my commodity bundle capital X. Okay? Now, compare capital X with capital Y. Here also what we are seeing that W is having less of X than small x than commodity bundle capital X, which means that Y is preferred to X but X is preferred to W. So between W and Y there must be a commodity bundle where the consumer is changing his preference. Okay? So that bundle M must be the point of indifference. Okay? So M must be a commodity bundle which is indifferent to commodity X. Okay? Similarly, if I take M as the reference bundle, I will find a point commodity bundle N which will be indifferent to M. If I take N as the reference bundle, I will find a commodity Q which is again indifferent to commodity M. The same thing will happen in the southeast zone. So in this way, joining Q, N, M, X, T, P, what I will get is the indifference curve. So indifference curve, which is obvious now, is likely to have a downward sloping convex shape. So let us now study the properties of indifference curve. Indifference curves are downward sloping. Okay. Second is they are convex to the origin. Now, any curve can be downward sloping, but that would not be implying that they have to be convex. So, convexity is a sufficient condition to show that the indifference curve is actually downward sloping. It is convex to the origin. This convexity actually implies it is convex to the origin. Now, it also means that the slope of the indifference curve, which is known as the marginal rate of substitution, is gradually diminishing. As we increase more and more of x, the slope is gradually diminishing. Third property of indifference curve is that two ICs will never intersect. They are parallel to each other. Okay? And the final property is that ICs represent higher utility in an indifference map. Higher ICs means more utility. Next, this is the shape of an indifference curve. You can see that indifference curve is actually a dividing line between preferred and non-preferred bundles. All the bundles, that is A, B, C, D and E, that are on the indifference curve understand the different properties of the IC curve and different curves. So here what we are saying is that this is in the first picture the IC shows that the X units are increasing, commodity X is increasing by say a fixed unit. So OX1 is equal to X1, X2 is equal to X2, X3 and so on. So as we move from A to B, X commodity rises by 1 unit, okay, but Y falls from Y1 to Y2. Now that is a large fall. Again, when we move from X2 to X3, that is from B to C, Y2 is falling by a lower amount compared, in fact Y2, Y3 is less than Y1, Y2. Similarly, Y3, Y4 is again less than Y2, Y3. Now why is this happening? This indicates that though the consumption of X is increasing successively by 1 unit, the amount of Y that the consumer is willing to forego in case of Y, and that is gradually decreasing. Now this means that X and Y are both normal goods. They are important goods to the consumer. So as his consumption of X increases, he is forced to let go of Y. But the amount he let go is gradually diminishing. So this ensures the convexity of the indifference curve. This very property is because the consumer is willing to let go less and less amount, or willing to sacrifice less and less amount of Y as X increases successively by 1. So if you take the mod value of the slope MRSXY, you find that it is gradually diminishing as X is increasing. The second property is that two ICs cannot intersect. Supposing we take IC1 and IC2. On the indifference curve IC1, there are two bundles R and S. So it is obvious that utility from R is equal to utility from S. Okay. Again, on the indifference curve IC2, there are two bundles R and T. So here also it is obvious that utility from R is equal to utility from T. Again, by transitivity, this would imply that T and S are equal. But that is not true, because though they have the same amount of X or X bar, the amount of Y actually varies. At S we have Y3, and at T we have Y2, and Y2 is greater than Y3. So T and S can never be equal. This implies that two ICs can never intersect. And the final property of the indifference curve is that the higher ICs will represent higher utility. This third picture actually shows the indifference map. You see, the indifference curves are all parallel to each other. They are never intersecting. They are all parallel to each other. Okay? Now, supposing I keep my Y constant at OY bar, and I move from one IC to another. So what do I see is the amount of X is gradually increasing from OX1 to OX2 to OX3. It is obvious that utility from commodity bundle A will be less than utility from commodity bundle B, which will again be less than utility from commodity bundle C. So what we get here is that higher ICs will give higher utility, and this is obtained from the axiom of dominance. Now, indifference curve means just the utility part, or what the consumer would like to consume and what kind of satisfaction he gets. But nothing comes for free. So here also when he buys commodity bundles, he has to pay. He has to pay money. So let us consider his budget. What is his budget? We assume that he consumes only two commodities, X and Y, okay? And his total income is N. He spends his total income on the two commodities X and Y, so that there is nothing left and savings is also zero. Now if we rearrange the equation m is equal to x dx plus y dy, what we get is this: y is equal to minus x px by py plus m by py. The slope of the budget line minus px by py is also negative. Okay? AOB is the budget set. When the consumer consumes entirely X, he has the coordinates m by px, comma 0. When he consumes entirely Y, the coordinates are 0, comma m by py. Now R, as we see, is an unattainable point. is beyond the excuse me, budget of the consumer. T is an attainable point, but his money is not fully spent. Now look at S. S and all other points on the budget line fully utilize the consumer's income. Okay. Now we come to the derivation of the consumer's equilibrium. What we do is that we impose the indifference curves over the budget line and see they cut the budget line at 6 different points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different points. Okay, A, B, C, D, and E. Now, as the consumer moves from A to B, he gets higher utility. From B to C, his utility further increases. From C to D, again his utility level falls, and from D to E, his utility level falls further. So, his utility is highest from commodity bundle C. Now, this C bundle shows the position where the indifference curve is tangent to the budget line. In our case, in this picture, IC3 is tangent to the budget line Rn. Okay? And at this tangency point, the slope of the indifference curve is equal to the slope of the budget line. So, this is the equilibrium of the consumer. Now, if you want to demonstrate this mathematically, we take the utility function u0 is equal to u function of xy. Taking total differential, we have the u is equal to ux dx plus uy dy. Ux and ui are partial derivatives of x and y respectively. They represent the marginal utilities. Okay. Now, if we rearrange du not is equal to 0 because there is no change in utility along the indifference curve. So, we get ux dx is equal to minus uy dy. So, ux by uy is equal to minus dy by dx. Now, the slope of the indifference curve is therefore is equal to minus ux by uy or minus nux by nuy. And the slope of the budget line is equal to minus dx by dy. Now, if we rearrange all this, we know that at the equilibrium point, the slope of the budget line is equal to the slope of the indifference curve. So, the slope of the indifference curve is nux by dx, nux by nuy, and the slope of the budget line is dx by dy. So, the consumer is in equilibrium when the ratio of the marginal utilities of the two commodities is equal to the ratio of their prices. Now, if we relax the action of some of the actions actually, we will get a few cases which is different from the which will show that they are different from the standard shape of the indifference curve. For example, if the two commodities are perfect complements, okay, they are required in 1:1 proportion, there is no question of any substitutability between them, then our indifference curve will look like this, L shape. They will be L shape in the case of perfect complements. Here the MRSXY value is nil. If the indifference curves are for two commodities which are perfect substitutes of one another, that is they can be perfectly substituted for each other, then the indifference curve again will look like a straight line, and here the substitutability is infinite. Now we have till now always assumed that the goods are goods, I mean the commodities are good commodities. Okay, there is no disutility or anything bad attached with them. But supposing I take a bad commodity, orange is my good commodity and cigarettes is a bad commodity. Obviously, we know that cigarette smoking is injurious to health. So, in such a case, what will be the shape of the indifference curve? You see, if I am given more and more of cigarettes, then to compensate for my loss in health, I will have to take more and more of oranges. So, in such a case, the indifference curve will be upward sloping. Okay, it will not have that downward sloping shape that we saw. Then, if you change the commodity, suppose you put cigarettes on the y-axis and oranges on the x-axis, then the indifference curve will become concave. That is, you want to have more, one unit more and more of oranges, you will sacrifice more and more of cigarettes. You don't want cigarettes, okay? You want more oranges. And it might make you land at a point where you are left only with oranges, you are not consuming any cigarettes at all. So it will be a case of monomania where it is consuming only one commodity. Now, as I said, from the law of diminishing marginal marginal utility becomes negative. So supposing A is the saturation point of commodity A. So beyond A, if I go on increasing my consumption, X will become a bad commodity from a good commodity, and the marginal utility of X will actually fall. Okay? Same thing will happen in case of Y. Supposing D is the point where full saturation in Y is achieved. So here again, Y will turn from a good commodity to a bad commodity, and what will happen is that now Y and NuY will become negative. Okay? Now this picture shows a special shape of the indifference curve. You see, in the southwest zone, we are having a normalizing. The black color of the curve, you see, that is the normalizing we have, where your marginal utility of both the commodities X and Y are positive. A is the saturation point of X. So if you go on increasing consumption of X, okay, beyond X naught, okay, what happens is that your NuX becomes negative. So you are having actually disutility, marginal disutility from commodity X, because your utility from commodity, marginal utility from commodity X has become negative. So to tolerate more of such a bad commodity, you need more of a good commodity. That is why your indifference curve here is becoming upward slope. See, from A to B, that indifference curve is upward slope. Now, if you take the point D, there your commodity Y has become fully saturated, and you cannot take in any more of commodity Y. So the marginal utility at point D of Y is 0. After that, marginal utility of Y becomes negative, which means that if you are taking in more and more of commodity Y, the marginal utility of Y is becoming less than 0. So here again, to tolerate more of Y, you need more of X. So you have to be very cautious about the two points X0 and Y0. X0 is the level where NuX is 0, and Y0 is the point where NuY is 0. Okay? Now look at the final zone, that is the northeast zone. That is CB. Look at the curve CB. Okay? Here, you are saturated in both. Okay? You are saturated in both. Which means that if you go from C to D, you are increasing your consumption of commodity X. So at that time, you are going to decrease your consumption of another bad commodity Y. But if you go from B to C, just the reverse way, the same thing happens. You are increasing your consumption of the bad commodity Y, so you must decrease the consumption of another bad commodity, that is X. So when we draw this total, all the four zones taken together, what we are getting is the first shape of an indifference curve. And the final thing that I want to show is the type of shape that an indifference curve can take when there is a preference for one particular commodity. You see, in the first picture, we can see that the indifference curve is normally shaped, okay? But suddenly it became linear. Now there is a marking at point A, which means beyond A, okay, beyond A, the consumer is not willing to tolerate any more sacrifice of Y. So here, from A, his indifference curve is becoming horizontal. Now what does this mean? That means that the indifference curve is actually partly linear and partly non-linear. Same thing happens when we have, when the consumer has a preference for commodity X. You see? He is moving as we move from here to up, what do we see? That the consumer is declining X and increasing Y. Okay? Now, beyond this level, the consumer is not willing to reduce his consumption of X. So what he will do? Now his indifference curve will be vertical. That means this amount of X must be present for him. So here again we have a non-linear and linear shape. So when we get the combination of an indifference curve which has both linear and non-linear parts, that is called a quasi-linear indifference curve. So finally I would like to conclude, though there are because cardinal utility theory makes an absurd assumption of measuring utility in newtons, which is not possible. And therefore, ordinal utility has no longer need of measuring utility in unit. All it does is rank commodity bundles, which any consumer can do. Okay, but there is one fallacy of the ordinal utility theory, and that is the assumption of rationality. Modern economists are challenging this theory of rationality. They believe it does not require all consumers to be rational to always to take logical decisions, and there is a big theory associated with that. We are not going into that, but the important point of the utility theory so far is what we gain is that it provides to a beginner an insight